day, and they just go off the reservation. You did point out perception, and a lot of times perception is what drives anything that's extreme. Okay, anything that's extreme.
Right.
The Trump protesters and the Trump rioters, and I will segregate the two, just like the Black Lives Matter protesters and the Black Lives Matter rioters. You have to segregate those two as well. But they all the Trump protesters and rioters are under the perception that election was stolen. Now, the charges were made.
Yeah.
And at first it was presented in what I thought was the proper way. Okay, let's go to the Attorney General of Georgia first, okay, and say, look, this is what happened. This is what we need to take care of. Well, there was really no. Every time they put a lawsuit out there, it was rebunked. Georgia Secretary of State Ben Raffensperger, I think is his name, something like that. But he said, when he was. And I heard an interview with him. And they said, well, didn't they present evidence to you that the election was stolen? And he said, no. He said, there was no evidence. The evidence they put forth were snapshots of Twitter posts.
The lawyers admitted that there was no evidence.
Yeah. And he said, this isn't evidence. This is a Twitter post by somebody I've never heard of. It's not evidence. And they said, well, yeah, all these dead people voted in the elections. They looked into that. And it is true. There were dead people that voted in the Georgia election. They found two. They
voted for Trump.
Oh, did okay? So I didn't know that. But I did hear that there were two.
They found two. They were Trump voters.
And there were three they found that voted illegally. I found another report that said, no, it wasn't two dead people. It was 13 dead people who voted. Okay, it was. Let's say it was 13.
Who cares?
That's not voter fraud. That's messing up. That's not even a rounding error, okay? There's a difference between voter fraud and 100% of every vote being done exactly like the book.
For that to happen, everybody in the system would have to be in on it.
Right.
There's no way that you could conduct. And the problem is there's two problems. There's just simple data that I confronted, because eventually they stopped bringing that to me because I just pointed out two facts. The first fact was, if you look at the ballot percentages comparing Donald Trump to the Republicans, in most states the Republicans ran between candidates, congresspeople and senators ran between 1 and 2.3% higher than Donald Trump in almost every single place where Donald Trump lost. So there's the Democratic plot. Let's elect Joe Biden, but then also elect more Republican congresspeople. That doesn't make any sense.
It makes no sense at all. Exactly.
And the second one is, I looked at the actual final breakdown of his share of votes. In 2016, he got 46.1%.
Mm-hmm.
In 2020, he got 46.8%. So what does that tell you? That 46 and 47% of the country supports Donald Trump. It doesn't generally go up.
Right.
He's not gonna go from 46 to 50 very easily. That's rare. That would actually be cause for alarm on the Democrats, because if you look through history, it's rare for a president. I mean, there are a few cases where the presidents, like, Ronald Reagan did a little bit. Ronald Reagan won in a landslide in 82.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's certain incidents where you have, like, Lyndon Johnson, who, but that was his first election. When you talk about your second election, Barack Obama went down. Clinton didn't do better than he did. He never got 50% either time.
No, he never did, because of Ross Perot.
Right. And so there's no reason to believe, like, he went up 0.7%. It's not like, so what do they think that he did? He only got 46% the first time. And that's the problem. They never made a single attempt to expand that 46%.
Well, and that's very true. The other thing is, and but the person who gets the most votes doesn't win the election. It's whoever it's whoever wins the Electoral College. That's who wins the election.
And they were hinging on that. And you can't. They were assuming that because Hillary Clinton, who ran literally the most awful campaign in general election recent history, she had in her campaign chair had a brother who was just as deep with the Russians as Manafort and the rest of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The Podesta group was part of the actual. So, I mean, you're using the Trump people use that as their standard, Hillary Clinton. That's why they lost. Oh, well, Joe Biden, as bad as he was, and Joe Biden was terrible, he's not Hillary Clinton. His campaign was a fresh new campaign. Yeah. None of those high-profile Clinton people. And he just basically blocked and tackled and rode the COVID thing, which I hated. Mm-hmm. I hated that whole COVID campaign. The fact is, he made it work,
and that's exactly right. In fact, I will go one step further. The reason Donald Trump won in 2016 is because the Democrats ran Hillary Clinton. The reason Joe Biden won in 2020 is because the Republicans ran Donald Trump.
Yep.
And that's kind of it in a nutshell. Okay. But in moving forward with debating the election, they say, well, this has never happened before ever. Well, yeah, it did with Al Gore. And where did that get Al Gore? Okay. He was, after he screamed and yelled and cried mm-hmm. foul and said that he was cheated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The country dismissed him. He turned into a fringe lunatic who nobody ever took serious again. He lost his marriage. He gained 100 pounds, and I don't know what the hell he's doing. Okay. He's out. He's out of it. And
he invented the internet.
Yeah, but that was beforehand, though. he invented climate change, and then he tried to become an internet sensation, and nobody cares. But Trump started off doing this in the right way. Okay, let's go ahead and get a lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and present the facts where
getting Giuliani is not the right way.
Well, I mean, Rudy Giuliani was a respected lawyer who's been around for a long time. Okay. Yeah. Now, the way he presented the case was terrible, mainly because I don't think he had a case to present. The Supreme Court, which has 3 Trump appointees on it. Okay. And is very right leaning right now. Not only did they not vote on this, but they voted 9-0 to not even listen to the arguments. 3 different times. 3 different times.
I think that's the bigger story. I have to say this. The election for me, and I was actually a little bit concerned about Barrett, not because nothing about her. I was just like, well, is she actually, I ain't gonna lie. I was partially concerned that she might be. But when I watched her, I was like, this is a real jurist.
Yeah.
This is a professional, and I wasn't worried about Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh has ruled against Donald Trump about 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
I would like to say this. I couldn't really have asked for more from the election. Because even though, like, people say, oh, well, the Democrats control the Senate, there's a lot more to that. The Democrats do technically control the Senate, but the mob doesn't control the Senate.
Correct.
The Senate is now in the hands of Kamala Harris and Amy Klobuchar and Chuck Schumer. It's not in the hands of Bernie Sanders. It's not in the hands of AOC. Those are different. People get caught up in all the Democrats are communists. No, it's not true. They're not all communists. They're not all trying to make you go to the boys' bathroom if you're a woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, this perception of the Democrats is this loony group of, extremists is not even close to being the case.
Well,
I think that there's going to be some balance, at least for the short term.
Well, I mean,
that's what I believe.
His name escapes me. Help me out. The senator from West Virginia, the Democrat,
Joe Manchin.
Yeah, Joe Manchin. I mean, he came out yesterday and said, "There's not going to be a $2,000 stimulus. I'm not voting for that." So, right, already for the first time he's opened his mouth, he's siding with the Republicans. So this is not going to be a cakewalk. It's not going to be a rubber stamp. Now, he may pull the Robert Byrd card and say, look, I'm going to do all this so you give West Virginia way more than we deserve as far as money goes. He's done that for a long time. Byrd did that. He's doing that. And
West Virginia is, he's a very good bet to switch because they are in trouble.
Yeah.
That is a state that is having some, and the funny thing about it is he says that, but that state pulls a lot of federal funding for their issues.
They always have. Well. Since the Robert Byrd days they have.
Yeah. And it's interesting because people are wondering about, they talk about the Southern strategy. But an interesting situation is people wonder, why did Barry Goldwater lose so badly? One of the reasons why Goldwater lost so badly is that, he was a staunch conservative. He was a staunch opposed the Civil Rights Act, sure, all that. But here's the thing about Barry Goldwater. He lost because he was too principled. Barry Goldwater wanted to privatize the TVA, and he wanted to reduce a lot of the sweetheart deals that the Southern states were setting up. And the South just was like, no, wait, TVA, that's our bread, that's our apple cart right there,
The Tennessee Valley Authority, the electric that goes on in the Southeast United States, for those who don't know.
Yeah. So Lyndon Johnson was actually very dominant in the South during that election, even though it was 1964, because he still had, even though like some of the Dixiecrats were not so happy about him with his civil rights position, they preferred him over Barry Goldwater, who was talking about turning off the spigot. Mm-hmm. So, these relationships are very much more complicated. Like MSNBC and CNN, they really oversimplify things. They don't really get into the intellectual nuts and bolts of stuff. Fox does a little bit, but then they get into their their weird, bizarre theatrics as well. The real political science, I'm hoping in the next year and a half, we will actually be able to study the political science of how these branches work. Because it was very difficult to do with them reporting on every stupid thing that Donald Trump says. Now that he's gone, now we're actually going to have to examine, how does governing actually work?
Well, and I hope, and I always have that hope, that we're going to move forward. The adults in the room are going to prevail. I mean, I'll use every talking point that I possibly can, but that's what really has to happen. The old 80-20 rule, which applies to everything. And as I get older, and as I look upon history, as I look to see where we've been, what we've done, what's worked and what has not, that whole 80-20 rule works so well. I mean, and that's why I'm criticized by many, because I always say the solution to anything is compromise. And I have people just wanting to string me up for saying that. How can you compromise your principles? I said, no, I'm not saying compromise your principles. I'm saying listen to what everybody has to say. Look at what everybody's looking for. Let's look at the reasonable things that reasonable people are asking for. And you know what? Maybe you don't get everything that you want. But maybe everything that you want isn't what's best for everyone, because you're never going to satisfy everybody. But if you're reasonable in the way that you approach something, if you if 80% of the people are happy, you're in, okay? And it's always been that way. It will always be that way. And this whole pandemic, this whole COVID-19 thing, I was on board with the CDC months ago, maybe a year ago, I guess.
I was too.
Well, here's what they said. They said, look, here's the thing. We need to social distance. We need to wash our hands. We need to wear a mask, and we need to flatten the curve. If they had never said another word until the vaccine came out, I think we'd have been okay, because that's basically it. Everything else is minutia. Everything else is just inciting people screaming and yelling and name calling. If you do all that, well, then you have to shut down the restaurants. No, in a restaurant, social distance, have everybody wash their hands. If you're not eating, you wear a mask, and you flatten the curve. Close down every other table or whatever you need